And tonight's topic is regarding the use of video documentary and in some ways I think questioning the limits of journalistic practice today. We have two very experienced and knowledgeable speakers. One is Chase Whiteside and the other is James O'Keefe. The way that the event is being planned out this evening is to try to keep loosely to a debate structure. So we have a moderator with ourselves tonight, who is Michael Carpin. So I'd like to thank Michael for being our moderator this evening. And the way that this debate will play out will be that we will have each of the speakers, Chase first and followed by James, doing a brief 10 to 15 minute introduction about their practice. And then following that introduction, we will be having moderated questions from Michael. And the way that moderation will play out will be that one speaker will be answering the question for a series of minutes, and then the other speaker will have a chance to kind of weigh in on that answer that was just given, perhaps do a rebuttal, and then following that we'll go to the next question. This will be going in a series for approximately 5 to 6 questions, and then we'll be opening up to the floor. So we'd ask if you do have questions throughout the evening, try to hold them, and then at the end of the moderated discussion, we'll be taking the microphone around and taking your questions, which will be addressed by either Chase or James. To give you a little bit of an introduction, just a very cursory professional introduction to both of the speakers, I'd like to tell you their bios. So James O'Keefe is a self-proclaimed progressive radical and a citizen journalist who has produced controversial recordings of public figures and workers in a variety of organizations. His most recent projects involved a multi-state investigation exposing features of Medicaid, the release of undercover videos that resulted in NPR's president and CEO resigning, and posing as a banker during the Occupy Wall Street movements in New York City. He is founder of Project Veritas, whose mission is to investigate and expose dishonesty and misconduct in public and private institutions. He is a 2006 graduate of Rutgers University and currently lives in New Jersey. Chase Whiteside is a documentary filmmaker, journalist, and a contributor to Huffington Post. He is also the co-founder of New Left Media. Whiteside is perhaps best known for his films documenting the participants at Tea Party events, at a Sarah Palin book signing, and during Glenn Beck's Restoring Honor rally. New Left Media's most recent video shows Ohio and Wisconsin workers defending their collective bargaining rights. He is currently living in Ohio. And Dr. Michael Carpin has taught advanced placement studies from the government and politics at Marple Newton Senior High School in Newton Square, Pennsylvania for the past 10 years. His courses give specific attention to civic engagement, evaluation of mass media, journalistic ethics, and the influence of media on the U.S. political climate. We wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for the very generous support of a number of institutions and departments within Temple University, so I would like to make mention of those. So that's particularly in thanks to the Pennsylvania State Council on the Arts, the Department of Political Science, the Center for the Humanities, Tyler School of Art, Department of Film and Media, and the General Activities Fund, as well as the Lectures and Forums Committee of Temple University. I'd just like to give it a very personal and thank you to everybody within the Department of Exhibitions and Public Programs. They've done a fantastic job setting up for this evening, as well as to Olivia Menta. So thank you all again for coming, and Chase Whiteside.
I would also like to thank Temple for bringing me here, everyone here for coming, and to James for agreeing to this debate. So since I'm perhaps the less known of the two of us, I'll start off just by introducing myself. I am a documentary filmmaker who is most known basically for these sort of roaming vox pop interviews with what my audience would take it to be as like inarticulate Tea Party conservatives. I'm not sure that that's our intention, but that's generally how the videos are regarded. We got our start and how all of this came to be back in 2009 during the raucous sort of healthcare town halls that were, all over the news, people shouting. We were first sort of hearing about this Tea Party movement. What is this? What does it mean? And we'd gone out to a local healthcare town hall in Columbus, Ohio. I'm from Ohio. And just sort of, we were asking the people who were there. The mainstream media's coverage of these events were like, it'd be a wide shot, they'd come and show everything and say, people are protesting today, and that would be it, right? And so we went out and we thought we would just sort of ask them, okay, well, why are you protesting? What are your problems with the healthcare bill? And what we heard wasn't necessarily that no one had any idea or that people were all clueless. What we heard that fascinated us was that people were saying the same thing, almost verbatim, over and over again. So you'd interview 5, 6 people in a row, and they'd have almost an identical concern. Now, I don't think all of these people woke up one morning and suddenly had exactly the same legal problem with the healthcare bill. They must have been getting it from somewhere. And that's sort of what we set out to do and have been doing with this project, is to try to find out not so much what people believe, members of the public, where they derive their public opinion from, but why they believe it, where those opinions come from. And so let me just, to give you an idea of what these look like, I'll show you a clip here from a recent one. Is this projector ready to go? Thank you. I asked him to shut it off, so. So, while that's getting started, so we've done a series of these videos now. The particular project I'm most known for doing, the series of interviews with Tea Partiers, and the reason I get asked to a lot of these things, presumably the reason I was asked to be part of this debate today, I consider to be somewhat of a finished project. So without further ado, I'll run this clip here. We're hearing from a lot of people who are talking about the concerns over the mosque that's being built in Manhattan. Do you guys share some of those concerns?
It's fundamentally wrong. It's just the wrong thing to do. Now, if they really wanted to give an olive branch, what they should have done, what the imam should have done, is he should have gone to the families first and ran this idea by the family. He went right to the politicians.
They want us to take a slap in the face by putting a mosque up there near Ground Zero. Well, how many mosques are in New York right now? There's a bunch of them. Why do they need another one? Just to slap us in the face?
It's not that they can't build a mosque, they just don't need to be building it right there and thumbing their nose up at us.
And do you think that's what they're doing by building it?
I know that's what they're doing.
I think it's sticking the eye in the American people. What, 3,000 people died there by Muslims.
Muslims are sticking a thumb in our eye and saying, there, what are you going to do about it?
This has nothing to do with an olive branch. It has everything to do with building a victory monument for their outlandish attacks upon America.
They've taken down those towers, and by taking down those towers, they've showed to the world that they've had victory over America and over the devil of the West.
We don't want this to become another Mecca, whereas there was a Muslim victory here, okay?
They have more mosques in New York City than you shake a stick at. What the devil do they need another one?
Wherever they have achieved a victory, they build a mosque.
Some might say that what's happening is they're confusing radical Islam with more moderate Islamic factions.
Yeah. I learned all I needed to know about Islam on 9/11.
So, if you'll participate with me for just a moment, how many people here remember this controversy over the supposed, the victim mosque? Yeah. How many people know whatever happened? Much fewer. And why is that, you know? And so this is what we try to get at in our videos. The public is, and this is true on the right and the left, the public is preoccupied with only the most recent news narratives. So they forgot, people don't know what happened because the news sort of stopped talking about it, right? But for the weeks preceding that event, you know, that's what their partisan media personalities were talking about. That's what Glenn Beck was talking about, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity. They were worried about this victory mosque. In that video, we also have Anchor Babies was another one during that period of time. And so you get these very, very shallow understandings of issues turned into literal sound bites here, right? It's a slap in the face, a poke in the eye, but when it actually comes down to any sort of substantial discourse, that you don't find. And it's evident here today, you know, the reason no one knows what happened is because the news doesn't really follow things for very long. The mainstream media follows things only insofar as it creates controversy. Eventually we tire of it. Eventually they stop covering it because of that. Now, today I'm here debating James O'Keefe. Which I'm actually quite honored to do. As I told him just a moment ago, I consider myself something of a fan, actually, of his work. And what I mean when I say that I'm a fan is I admire. There's a level of bravery that comes with doing some of the work he does that I could never do. Okay, I couldn't go undercover in that vein and possibly get out without being found out immediately, okay? And there's a certain tenacity in being someone who is making media about issues that matter to them. Now, when I started and was working on this project, I would call myself an activist, not a journalist. I was setting out to do something about the healthcare bill, to show a side of these healthcare town halls and the Tea Party protesters that I thought was not being shown in the media. It's my belief that James's work is likewise the same, that his work is activism, not journalism. And I think there is a distinction that we'll get to extrapolate, I'm sure, throughout this debate. James's Acorn work never found widespread corruption in Acorn, right? His work with NPR, covering NPR, where the fundraiser for NPR had said absolutely foolish comments about conservatives and Tea Partiers. He never found that NPR had taken money for coverage or had changed coverage because they were getting money from anyone. One of his things was to do, and I'll let you recharacterize this if I get it wrong, but was to try to get a marriage license to marry another man, and told the person he was getting the license from that the intention was just to get the benefits and then like get divorced a day later. But what are these truths? Project Veritas, Veritas for Truth. What are the truths that are being gotten at here? I mean, heterosexuals could marry for a day and then divorce and have done it for benefits. So what's the point? What's the truth you get at? An investigative journalist, to my way of thinking, would go out and investigate things that are happening. If there is corruption, they would seek it out and they would reveal what is going on. Creating theater, little scenarios that don't exist, right? There wasn't a widespread problem of Acorn funding prostitutes, or helping, prostitutes out. There hasn't been a widespread problem of NPR skewing their coverage because of donations from the people with Muslim Brotherhood connections. Those things aren't happening. So when you create something that's not true, but totally false, and then you capture a few people who don't do a very good job responding, admittedly, some of them do a poor enough job that they deserve to be fired. But what truth is that? What are you getting at? You're creating something. You're not finding a truth and investigating it. You're coming up with one altogether that isn't there in the first place. And I want to end just my beginning talk here to say that I think we're in a huge change in media. And specifically what's happened is we've gone from having a scarce media environment, right, where there were gatekeepers of information, people who determined what to publish, and they were given great responsibility when they made that determination. When there were 3 evening newscasts, let's say, in your daily newspaper. That's not a lot of media space compared to what we have today. So what content got put into it was something that had to be considered very greatly, very ethically. And there was huge importance placed on factual accuracy, on accurate representation. The other end of that is the public was sharing the facts, right? We didn't, if the 3 evening news networks came out and said, Obama, not a Muslim, we thought, okay, well then Obama's not a Muslim. But right now we live in a time where there's such an abundance of media. No longer is it why publish something, why is it important? It's why not publish. Everything gets published. Anything you want goes out there. And so suddenly the journalistic ethic that used to be something our gatekeepers had, that our gatekeepers had to decide for us, what content was of quality and worth and what content wasn't. And there are some bad things that go along with that. Now that impetus is on us to recognize what content we should be consuming and what content we shouldn't. And when so many people are creating activist media and passing it off as journalism, we risk allowing people to build these little information spheres where they only get information from people they already agree with, where they never hear competing points of views, where the truth gets to be entirely different for different segments of the population. Someone who listens to Rush Limbaugh on the way to work, comes home and watches Glenn Beck, and then watches Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly at night, and it fills it all in with a little bit of Drudge Report review, maybe Andrew Breitbart's BigGovernment.com, has an entirely different sense of the truth and reality than someone who spends their time in the Huffington Post or with Rachel Maddow. They have totally different ideas of the world. And we can see what's going on in Congress, and we can see what's going on in public discourse as reflections of what consequences that holds for us. So, okay, well, thank you so much for holding all of this, and I'm excited to get going here. So.